Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. As promised, I've managed to find time to slip in this last release ranking video, and this one is for Geminijets, who've announced their 10 new models for December. Gemini have had an okay year. They've released some interesting models here and there. They've also released a lot of not very interesting models. Sometimes the models have been excellent, sometimes the models have been awful. It's kind of that hit and miss with Gemini. You're never quite certain that a model will turn out well, and sometimes you're convinced it won't turn out well, and you're usually right. But sometimes they do turn out well, so it's not all bad. Anyway, 10 new models. Not particularly surprising, another very Gemini month, almost all American, little bit from elsewhere. Anyway, we're going to have a look at these releases, which do provide, as last month, an interesting counterpoint to ngmodels, who nowadays provides a lot of competition for Gemini, and they don't like it at all. They don't like it up 'em, as they used to say in Dad's Army, for those old English viewers out there. But nonetheless, it doesn't mean Gemini has shot their bolt. They've still got some interesting stuff to produce. And this month does see the announcement of a brand new mould. Obviously, one of the things with Gemini is, unlike most other brands nowadays, they just wow you, or not, with new molds, completely allegedly ready, but you're never sure whether they're going to be any good or not. Not really interested, Gemini, in giving people a heads up or showing them samples or asking for feedback. Basically, like it or lump it, you get what they're giving you. Tough luck. That's Gemini's attitude. Before I get into checking the video, as always, let's chuck a like on, subscribe to the channel. Wish everyone who's watching a fabulous Christmas. Hope you have a great time. I'll try and keep the content going over the period. So keep on checking me out at Airlines on Instagram and on Facebook, and at yesterdaysairlines.com, obviously, where there's loads of stuff. And as I said in the last video, I'll be doing my top 15 of the year, which does include a couple of Geminis. So it's not like I hate them, as some people, mainly Gemini, think. It's just that they need to try harder, really. Anyway, let's get on and have a look at this month's 10 new release announcements. Okay, so we're going to start with the Airbus narrow bodies. Not really a Gemini forte, because they're using the jcwings A320, A321 mold, which is highly variable, but not always a disaster. And we start off with a Delta Airlines A320 CEO N376NW, and this is usually where I go on to say, why would you buy this? Because NG have released it already, and they did just release one of these. However, as many people have noted, NG rather stuffed up the window line on their Delta A320. It's way too high, and that does open up a smidgen of opportunity for this Gemini one to be competent. I won't say better, because the mold is definitely a lot inferior, but the model could still be pretty nice. I do have a couple of CEO Gemini A320s. I've got a Northwest Airlines one. The CFM engine's too big, but you can live with it, almost. You know, the rest of the mold isn't as good. The printing or the cockpit windows is a bit meh as well. But hey, if they get the window line at the right level, then it may be competitive with the NG one. So for this model, I'm not going to put this one into workhorse. I'm going to put this one up in the high fly. I think this one's got some opportunity to have a useful place in the market. Next up, we've got a Jet 2 A321neo. The reg is GSUNB. And this model is, of course, hamstrung by the enormous Neo engines that they slap on their A321neos and their A320neos as well. Too big. Sometimes the mold comes out looking really bad as well. Overall, it's just not going to be especially good. And not only will it not be very good, but it's been made before, because ngmodels have made a perfectly reasonable Jet 2 A321 before they made GHLYF. Now, they did make it a few years ago. Quite a few years ago now, 3 years ago. Maybe there's some extra need for this. It is a different reg. I don't know. Am I feeling incredibly generous this Christmas? Will I put this one into work? I think I'll put it into workhorse since there's one. It's been a while since anyone made one, so I'll put this one into workhorse. Though the engines, watch out for the engines, those knuckle dragging engines. Okay, there's another A321neo, and I'm going to be less pleasant about this one. This one is in the colours of Spirit Airlines. The reg is N702NK. It's got the full block Spirit titles and Spirit.com on the engines. It's exactly the same model as was made recently by ngmodels. Same reg and everything as that model. So really, absolutely zero reason for this to exist. And this one, I think, will be a clunker. I'm just feeling a lot less pleasant about this one than I am about the Jet 2. I'm not sure why. The Jet 2 should probably also have been a gas guzzler, but I'm definitely going to gas guzzle this Spirit one. It's really got nothing interesting to say for itself. But now we come on to something that does have something interesting to say for itself. It's the new mould that's just been announced. It's a Porter Airlines Embraer 195E2. So it's the new version of the Jungle Jets. And the reg is CGK Quebec Lima. It's a nice scheme, Porter. They're an airline that's grown nicely from their, Dash 8 beginnings. The scheme is not particularly exciting, but it is quite nice and businesslike. I'm intrigued about what this mould will look like. I hope that Gemini produce a new mould and don't just try and botch the old mould, because they've got, obviously, one of the picture I'm showing is an Embraer 190, but they've got this first generation E-Jet mould, which isn't great. It doesn't help that the undercarriage just feels completely wrong, especially the nose gear in terms of its position and its shape and size. It doesn't help. Yeah, it's not a great mould. It's not dreadful, but it's not great. Like quite a lot of their regionals could do with a bit of a new front end, and there are other areas where it's not spectacular as well. So I hope that they do more than just kind of take this nose and put new wings, engines, and undercarriage on it. But even if they did that, I guess that would improve it quite a lot, because those are some of the areas which are the weakest parts of that mould. So it'll be really interesting to see what this is like. I want to be hopeful that it's going to be okay, but can I be hopeful? After all, the 737-600 and the 767-400 that Gemini have released relatively recently as new molds have both stunk, really. They've both been really lazy and poor, sloppy kind of renditions with not particularly well crafted areas, and often reusing things that are really old, like the engines and pylons on the 767. So it's hard to be that optimistic, but in this case, I'd like to think that this will be nice. There's definitely a lot of potential here. No one else is producing this. So, yeah, I'm going to put this in supersonic. Okay? I'm going to be optimistic. I think that hopefully this will turn out well, and Gemini will surprise me with a model which really deserves, to be bought. So I'm hopeful. Let's see what they do with that one. Next up is also another interesting model. It's a Boeing 727-200, the sort of model I'd usually really welcome. Southwest Airlines, M406BN. It's one of these green, almost Southwest 727s that they got from Braniff when they had the lawsuit against Braniff. Now, Braniff only had kind of green paint, so they didn't really paint the colour correctly, and they turned out quite green. I'm not entirely sure that the colour on the artwork is quite green enough, actually, for this aircraft. But I have to say that the version that Aeroplastics have made, which I own, has not got the right colour on it. So there's definitely potential for this to be a replacement for that and for it to be better. Again, though, I'm rather concerned because the 77s they've been making have turned out really poorly recently. Obviously, they had that hush kit disaster on that. I think it was National Airlines one. And the CP Air that I got earlier in the year, that was a right piece of junk. Not only was the livery poorly applied, especially at the tail, the chevron logo was just completely the wrong orientation, but the front of the model, again, is really poor. The undercarriage, the nose gear tyres too big, and they're kind of jammed in there to the actual nose gear doors to the extent they looked like they'd been clipped. It looked like really bodged. And then the front of the aircraft was really pointy, and the cockpit printing was really embarrassing as well. It just turned out to be a poor model. I really hope that the Southwest 727 goes back to being more like some of the earlier releases on this mould, American Airlines, things like that, which are actually quite decent models, and I acquired and I'm quite happy with. So again, it's got potential to be really good, but keep an eye out for some production shots. The problem is it's really hard to tell from Gemini production shots. But again, I'm going to go with the potential here, and potentially this is a really good model and definitely a high flyer. But again, I'm concerned about what it might actually turn out like. Okay, now we've got a couple of 737s, and so there's not a great deal of good stuff to say about the first one. It's UT Air, it's a 737-800, RA73090. Actually, it's a sort of model I would probably be interested in if it wasn't using this mould. The fact it's using this Gemini 737-800 mould, which is really poor and seems to be getting worse because they just don't seem able to put it together properly, and the wings are like flapping like that Velo release. It really puts me off even thinking about getting it. The delivery isn't particularly exciting. I mean, in fact, it's potentially a dreadful scheme now. But I like Russian Airlines. It is interesting that Gemini are producing this. Maybe it's an older model again that's sitting around the warehouse before the Ukraine war. I don't know, but it's odd that an American company that's so avowedly American is producing something which is so obviously Russian. And you wonder who's going to be buying it or how they're going to be getting these into Russia or what. But it is an odd choice in that regard. But that doesn't upset me so much as the fact that it's just on a dreadful mould, and this one is going to be gas guzzling its way into the rankings there. Next up is a Max, and the Gemini Max, as you probably know, is much better than their Series 800. The reg of this one is VH8IA. It's only so boring though because it's been made by almost everyone else. ngmodels have made it, obviously very well. Phoenix has made it, not very well. Yeah, I don't know why you'd get this when you could have got one of the previous two out there skiing. No matter. I mean, this will be better than the Phoenix one, but I'd have thought that you'd have got the NG, which is still available from retailers, so it didn't look like it sold amazingly itself. So yeah, it's not exciting. I'm going to workhorse this one. I'm sure it'll be okay as long as they don't make the nose too pointy, but done before. And as you can see, again, like last month, that's 4 of the models I've talked about so far. So 4 of 6 that they've just been made already, haven't they? Or 4 of 7, sorry, 4 of 7. So nearly half, over half the models have been made by Gemini, made by NG, sorry, recently. Which kind of makes you question, why Gemini are doing that. Now, I've heard some people suggest that, you should go for the Gemini option because they're cheaper. I find that kind of slightly ironic. A, they're not cheaper anywhere apart from the United States. Everywhere else, they're the same price or more expensive than NG. And secondly, I'm sure Gemini don't consider themselves to be a budget brand model line. So it makes me smile somewhat that people consider them to be that nowadays. Oh, we didn't get the NG because, it's a bit too expensive. We got the Gemini, we just had to settle for it. You get what you pay for, kind of thing. That's kind of funny. And I'm sure they don't see themselves that way. So I think they honestly think they can compete, but realistically, I don't think most people think they can. Anyway, enough of that. We've still got a couple of models to discuss here, and we're moving into Boeing wide-body territory now for the last few releases. First up, we've got United Parcel Services 7478 freighter. Yeah, it's not exactly setting the world on fire, is it? It's not like they haven't made 7478s in UPS colours previously. They've made quite a few. They've made it both interactive and non-interactive versions. So yeah, it's not particularly exciting, I would say, at all. And the reg of the aircraft is N609UP, and there's not much more to say about it. It will be a perfectly fine model, but you'd have thought that most people would have already acquired one of these previously if they wanted it. So not overly thrilling. I'll just put that one into workhorse, I think. There's another 7478 this month, another freighter, and this one is the Atlas Air Apex Logistics N863 GT, the final 747 produced. So that's a kind of not too surprising model for Gemini to make. It has been announced by NG just recently, so you've got plenty of options. It's also been made by Phoenix, and that model's been out for a while now. They got there way beforehand, so that's another option. Can't say that I'm expecting this model to be better than the NG, and it's probably inferior maybe to the Phoenix as well, because people have got issues with the upper deck form there, and I'm not entirely certain whether that's been modified or not, but regardless, I don't expect it to really be competing. I'm going to put this one into workhorse as well. And that just leaves the one last model, or kind of two, but one's flaps down. It's just a variant, and we've got a United Airlines 777-300ER. The reg is N2352 uniform. It's the same reg again that's been made by ngmodels just recently. Aviation 400 have also made one, not the same reg. Gemini made one actually quite a few years ago now, but on the old mould. Recently having some interesting chit chat about comparing offerings from NG and Aviation 400 and the 777s. And this will make another good comparison. Get a third one here. I don't have them, but if you saw three of these together, it'll be interesting to see which one was better, and it'll be quite cool to do a detailed review looking at exactly the same models. Whether you think AV400 are gimmicky and not great, or you prefer the version of NGs which don't have as many gimmicks, or vice versa, I mean, it's entirely in the eye of the beholder. Flaps down is another interesting concept to throw in the mix there, and one that is quite cool, but not one that has a particularly big place in my collection. I do like the JC777. I do think all of the 777 molds have got something to offer, and they're different. They've got good and bad points in different places. They're all perfectly viable, and this one will be perfectly nice, but I question again why it's required when you've had two others recently, both of which have been out, and they've been out for a little while, and they look like they've sold well because they appear to be out of stock in most places. So yeah, again, it doesn't seem like a particularly worthwhile model, and you got to say it's probably going to therefore be a workhorse for me again. So it's not again a great month for Gemini, but there is, as often the case, some sparks of interest. The Porter is definitely far and away the most interesting of the models. It'll be interesting to see what they can do with that new mould, and good on them for going there, because I don't think anyone else is likely to anytime soon. And then you've got models which they've made before a few times, like the UPS. You've got models which have been made by NG or competition, the Delta, the Jet 2, the Spirit, the United. Yeah, they don't really offer a lot except where someone's made a cock-up, so the Delta A220 potentially could be good. The Southwest has been made for as well, but I put that one in a different category because it's A, because it's classic, and B, because it was made by Aero Classics. It's hard to find, and they didn't do a particular job anyway on it, so that one's got a lot of potential. And then you've got kind of the odds and sods, UT Air and Virgin Australia. And again, the Virgin one is one that's been made before by competition, so yeah, not great, but not a disaster either. But I would certainly be interested in seeing how the Porter turns out, and I'm interested to see how the Southwest turns out personally. And there's definitely something to like here and there in the rest. Anyway, that is my thoughts for Gemini in December. Again, I wish everyone a Merry Christmas, and I will be back on the YouTube channel no doubt after the Christmas break. to maybe look at the jcwings December releases, which will be out very soon, or announced very soon. They will be out soon, and also to do some other cool stuff like top 15 models of the year and things like that. So keep an eye out on the channel. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.